Alright, we're going to continue in this project, our Snowflake here. This is pretty much where we left off after day one of instruction. We have a nice one-armed or one-branched thing that we need to duplicate. And last week we talked about a couple ways to do that. And so this is a little bit of review. So if you want to duplicate something in your sketch, so now I'm in my sketch, and if I want to make a circular pattern, there is a tool for that up at the top. You need to find your patterning tools. Right now it's set to linear pattern. If you click the arrow, there's a couple other options here. There's transform, but I'm looking for a circular pattern. This allows me to select any objects that I want to pattern around the point of origin, which is in the center of my drawing. So I'm going to draw a selection box around all of those lines. And I'm going to click to accept that, and now I can change the number to 6. So this is a very quick and easy way to duplicate things in your drawing. One of the drawbacks to this is now if I edit one thing, say I want to delete that, it doesn't delete that from all of the copies. So if I wanted to edit just one of these things, that would be a benefit. If I wanted one of them to look different, that would be the benefit. But if I wanted them all to look uniform after the circular pattern, I would have to draw now 6 of them if I was going to make a change. The other drawback is you cannot circular pattern a spline. We talked about that last week. So if you have any custom curves in your drawing that you've created with splines, they won't duplicate within the sketch. So now we're going to go over what I think is a preferred method to pattern. So we're going to accept the sketch, and instead of doing it in the sketch, we have some different tools up here, mostly related to three-dimensional modeling, which we're going to learn about today. But this tool specifically is what we're looking for. This is a three-dimensional linear pattern, and next to that is an arrow, and then you can select a circular pattern, which is what we want. So we want to pattern this in a circle. So the first thing I need to do is select what I want to pattern. You can see it's not allowing me to select anything in my drawing. That's because it's looking for parts to pattern. And a part is a solid object which would appear down here once we've created some. We have none. So if I want to pattern a sketch, I need to change this to a feature pattern. Now I can select the sketch as an option. And the next thing I need to determine is the axis of pattern. So I'm going to click that and then select the mate connector. This is a tool that I can use to create the axis of rotation. So I'm going to determine that by clicking on that point in my drawing, and immediately I get duplicates in a circular pattern, and it's set to 4. So I want 6 instead. I'm going to change that to 6. And there's some other settings in here, but I want to keep this as the default. So I'm going to just click the check mark because I'm done. Now if I were to make an edit to my sketch, it's going to change all of the other instances because the circular pattern is dependent on the sketch, which is a huge benefit when you're creating a circular pattern. Then you can change one of them, and then all of them will change as well. Alright, so let's talk about extruding. We're going to be creating our first solid, which is exciting. So we're going to click the Extrude tool, which is to the right of the sketch tool. And most of the tools are aligned to where the most used tools are on the left. So just if you're looking for a very common tool, look towards the left. So this tool allows you to select any faces or regions to extrude. So here is a defined region, and I know that because it's completely enclosed and it's shaded telling me that it is an enclosed region that I could select. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and immediately you'll see two things happen. One, you visually see thickness where there was none before. So now we have a three-dimensional object. The other thing is you've now created a part. So in our parts list, we have a part 1. So this is our first solid in our project. In here, you have the option to change directions of the extrusion by clicking on the arrow. So if you don't like the direction of extrusion, you want it to extrude down instead of up, you can just click on that and it reverses the order. So now you're going down instead of up. There's also an arrow here which does the exact same thing. And then if you want to eyeball and see like either a larger or smaller extrusion thickness, you can grab by clicking and holding on the arrow and adjusting up or down. It's kind of a freehand extrusion. You can also identify a specific number by clicking in the depth field and typing in. So I want this to be 3 millimeters thick. So I'll type 3 and then enter. So that's the basics of the extrude. I'm going to click the check mark to accept that, and now I have my first part. So let's go ahead and do the second one. Click on extrude, and I'm going to select the next region here. And a couple of things have happened without you knowing. One is this has changed to, instead of new, add. And this is something that Onshape did for you because these two parts are touching. It's assuming you want to combine the two together so that they will become one part. So it has changed from new to add at the top, and then it's also chosen the merge scope, which is part 1. So instead of a new part, it is adding a part to part 1, so it's adding to an existing part. Let's say I wanted this to be its own separate part. I'm going to click on new instead, and now change that to 3 millimeters, and then click the check mark. So in Onshape, if the parts are the same, it will color them the same. If they're different, it will give them a different color. The more parts you have, sometimes the harder it is to distinguish, if it's the same part or not. But here we can also see not only are they different colors, but there are specific boundaries for each solid. So we have two separate parts that are overlapping, but they are separate. So what if I want to combine these two parts after they've been created? So you can union solids. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. So I'm going to click on the Boolean tool, and union is the first option. That's the one that you probably would use the most. Union, and then you would select your tools. So you'd select part 1 or part 2 and part 1. And because it's set to union, when you click the check mark, they will become one solid part. So now instead of two parts here, I have one part again, and you can see there's no more dividing lines. So those are two ways that you can create union parts. One is during the extrusion process, and the other is after the parts have been created. You can use the Boolean tool to add parts to each other that are touching or overlapping. So let's go ahead and continue and get the rest of our little branches here. I'm going to add, if I click on the region, it's automatically going to change. You'll see that here. It's set to new right now, but I'm going to click on a region, and it automatically assumes I want to add to an existing solid, which I do. So I'm going to click that region, and I'm going to add the rest of these regions together. And then I want to change this to be 3 millimeters. so they're all the same thickness. And the scope is going to merge with part 1. So all those regions are adding to part 1. So I click the check mark. So there we have a nice solid one-piece snowflake. So it may look like you're seeing behind it the circular pattern. So if you want to hide that, you can go in here and click hide, so you no longer see the sketch behind it. So it's all just one solid. So now that you know how to create sketches and then translate that into a solid, we're going to modify our snowflake in a couple different ways. The first way is I would like you to add some things. So make it a little bit more interesting. So in my sketch, if I wanted to add something to this sketch and have it be a part of the circular pattern, go ahead and rotate this around. Let's say I wanted to add just a little circle on the ends of each of these sides. So I can go into the circle tool and let's do a 3-point. Let's do a center point circle. I'm going to choose the midpoint of this line to attach it to, and then snap it to the edge of that rectangle. Actually, that just made a round, so let's undo that. Let's do, I want it to be larger than that, so I'm going to go ahead and attach it to the midpoint, but then go out at a greater radius than that. So there I have a circle, and I'm going to trim the extra stuff out of here. Now I'm going to mirror this over. Select a mirror line, that's my center construction line. Then I want to mirror over this. Now I can go in and trim this. So this is just an example of how you can add some new features to what you've already drawn as a two-dimensional snowflake. I'm going to accept that in my sketch, and now you can see automatically it's been added to my circular pattern. Not only that, it's been added to my region, which has been extruded and then combined into Snowflake. So since all of these things are connected, if I edit one of these arms, it's going to duplicate that around in a circular pattern and edit the extrusion, which edits my solid. So once you've taken some time to add a few extra features, I'm going to add some details in the center here just as a separate sketch. So let's say I want something that's not patterned. So in sketch 1 is my circular patterned each of these arms. So if I don't want it to be patterned, I would then need to create a separate sketch. So I'm going to do that next to show you how to do that. So we have one sketch. I'm now going to create another sketch. I need to choose the plane as always. I'm going to choose the top plane. Even though I can't see it because it's hidden, I can still select it. So I'm going to click on the top plane, and now I'm going to hide everything else so I don't get distracted. Just go ahead and hide the parts, which are the solids, and I'm going to hide the circular pattern here. Actually, let's go ahead and reveal all that. There we go. And now I want to add a hexagon in the center here. So let's go ahead and choose from the tools the Inscribed Polygon tool. I'm going to choose this as the center point, my point of origin. And I want to make sure that I am aligned to where it makes sense to my drawing. And this is going to be a center region. Then I could choose the sides, increase or decrease. I want it to be 6, so I'll click there to place it. So there's one region. I'm using a particular Snowflake drawing as a reference, so I need to make actually 2 more of these. So I'm going to go ahead and drag out. This one's going to be slightly larger, say about right there. Click to place it, and then one last one. Click right there, and click to place it. So now I have a new sketch which allows me to then choose which regions I want to extrude. Now they all appear solid because they are defined regions. But in reality, I want this center one to be empty. I don't want that to be extruded. So I'm going to go now to my extrude option. I'm going to orbit a little bit so I can see the thickness. And I want the center part to be extruded as one solid. I want that to be the same as everything else, 3 millimeters. And then we're going to go ahead and click the check mark. Make sure sketch 2 is visible again because I want to extrude one more region. Now I'm going to click on extrude. And I want this region to be extruded. You can see it just selected the boundary that is on the outside. So just that region that I selected. So now I'm going to change that to 3 millimeters. And that is what I wanted, so I'm going to click the check mark. Now I'm going to reveal my parts. So I have part 1, and I want these all to be combined together, so when I print them, it's all one solid. So the last step I'm going to do is combine them together using the Boolean tools. Make sure I select union, and then this is part 1, part 2, and part 3. They've all been collapsed in to form one part. I'm going to click the check mark to accept that. So I've now just added a lot of detail to my snowflake. So that is goal number 1 in your project, is add some additional detail. You can add them to your patterned sketch, or you can create new sketches and create new elements that will eventually be combined into one solid. The next thing we want to do is we're going to add a circular loop up here, and this is eventually going to be an ornament, like for a Christmas tree. So we're going to be adding a little circle on top here that you can hang it from a tree from. So now we need a new sketch, because we don't want that to be duplicated. We don't need 6 different loops. We only need 1. So I'm going to create a new sketch, choose the top plane as a sketch plane, and I'm going to choose to hide my parts just so I can see my sketches. And if you need to, you may have to go over here and check and reveal some of your sketches if they were automatically hidden. And what I want to reference, since this in my drawing is the top, I'm just going to create my loop here on the top. So what I'm going to do is grab the circle tool, and I don't want it to be attached. I want it slightly off, but vertically aligned with the center of that trunk there. So I'm going to reference the center line just by hovering my mouse over it before I click so that it's aligned vertically. Then I'm going to click an approximate spot and drag away to create my circle. Now this is going to be too big, but I'm just going to go ahead and go with it. Now I need another circle, and it's going to be inside the other. Whoops, why did I change it to construction? Escape, circle, there we go. So both of these are a little bit too large, so I'm going to shrink them down by dimensioning them. I'm going to start with the center one. Now let's say I want that to be 5. I'm going to do the same thing here and have it be 10. Alright, so there's something wrong there. Get rid of that. Alright, so if you see something, I had some sort of weird thing I referenced, a tangent reference that shouldn't have been there. So if you haven't already experienced that, sometimes you'll get that error and you just need to delete one of your constraints if you accidentally got one in there. Alright, now the last thing I want to do is shrink this down to where this circle is touching, because I want it to eventually be attached to this solid. So I'm just going to dimension between this point and this point and decrease that until they're touching. So I'm just going to guess 4 millimeters. It's actually a pretty good measurement. I'm just going to leave it there, accept my sketch, and now I'm going to go and create a new solid. Actually, it's going to be joined with the other solid. So let's reveal part 1. This will just reduce the number of steps I have to take. Alright. Now I want this to be combined with part 1. So I'm going to start the extrusion process and choose just the outer circle. So I'm creating a ring with a hole in the middle. And change that to 3. And it automatically chooses to add that to the existing part because they're touching. That's exactly what I want to have happen. So I'm going to click the check mark. Alright. Now the very last thing we need to do is create a slot in the bottom. And this will make sense later on. So to do that, I'm going to now create a new sketch. So I could go to the sketch here. Again, the same sketch plane, top. And then I'm going to be hiding my part so I can see the sketch. And I'm going to be drawing a rectangle down here. And I want this rectangle to go all the way to the center, but it needs to be smaller in width than this main trunk. So I'm going to do a rectangle. I'm just going to create it over here off to the side. Alright. And then I know my dimensions here are 75 millimeters from the center out. And then this thickness here in class we determined was going to be 5 millimeters. So I'm going to first dimension the long side. It's going to be 75. And then the short side, I want it to be a little bit bigger than 3 millimeters. So let's say 3.5. And then I need to attach this rectangle to the point of origin. So I'm going to use the midpoint option. And this time I want it to be attached to the lower part. So up here I have my little ring. Down here is where I want to have that slot. So I'm going to go ahead and select this line as the line that I want to have the midpoint of, and then attach it to the point of origin. Alright, now I'm going to go I'm going to accept the sketch, and I'm going to extrude this new region. So if it becomes confusing to you, you can hide your other sketches. So I'm going to go ahead and hide sketch 2 and sketch 1 and the circular pattern. I just want to extrude this. It doesn't really matter how thick it is as long as it's thicker than 3 millimeters. I want it to pierce through the original solid. So I'm going to click the check mark. Now I'm going to reveal part 1, and my goal here is to subtract this new object that I created from my snowflake. So that is a Boolean function I'm going to be subtracting. So I'm going to click on the Boolean tool, and I want to choose subtract. And then the tool is the object that you want to have remove material from. Like it's going to be cutting the hole. So this is the tool that's cutting the hole. And then my target is going to be part 1, the snowflake. And automatically you can see once those two things are selected, it takes away that material in the solid. That's exactly what I want to have happen. So I'm going to click the check mark to accept that. Oh, did it work? Let me hide part 2. No, it did not work. Where is my Boolean? Alright, let's do that again. That's not what I want either. Subtract. Tools is this thing. Target is this thing. Click the check mark. There we go. Alright, so eventually we're going to have another part that will be sliding into this part. And that will be in the next lesson.